Hello everyone, this is Mr. Jackson, and today we're going to be concluding our Concept 2 conversation on all of our special senses by finishing with the ear. And the senses that we're going to be talking about related to the ear are going to be hearing and balance, or equilibrium. So the ear is the sensory organ. It's for these two things, again, hearing and balance. Our ears are designed to receive what we call mechanical waves, right? Or vibrations that are created from sounds in our environments. And then we can convert these mechanical waves, these vibrations, into nerve signals that our brains can interpret, right? So we always have to translate these different types of stimuli or sensations into the same forms that the brain is structured in order to read and to react to. So sound is creating vibrations in the air, and those vibrations ultimately travel through our ear canal to our eardrums, and these cause basically a shift, right? Because the sound and those vibrations hit against our eardrums. When they do, this causes tiny bones, our auditory ossicles, to basically shift position and moves internal fluid against an internal membrane. Okay, we have a triggering of tiny little hair-like cells that would then stimulate neurons to fire action potentials and to carry those action potentials, those electrical signals, to a specific area of the brain based on what nerve is carrying those signals. Okay, so again, we're going to approach this through an exploration of the outer, middle, and inner ear structures to get an appreciation for the pathway of these things, but overall the physiology of how we hear and how we have that internal sense of balance with our external environment. So, very important slide. I like this slide a lot. As we go through this, please feel free to pause the video and to refer back to those big body diagrams where you can actually label all of these structures. I would highly suggest sectioning off or color coding all of these structures based on which ones fall within the outer, middle, and inner ear, okay? Because they're naturally going to have a different overall function based on where they're located and what those structures do. So, we've got 3 parts of the ear. That's how we're going to set it up. Again, if you'd like to pause, this is what you can use to label those key structures that we're about to get into a little more in detail. We'll start with the external ear. I'll move myself up here so you can see all those labeling points. This is going to be a lot more specific to the big body diagram image that you have available, but you can use any one that you find most useful. You can see it's still broken into external, middle, and inner ear based on the color coding that you see here, so do keep that in mind. We're going to start with the external ear. You have the pinna or auricle. This is the part that we actually see, and it's made of cartilage. It's what you actually would call your ear. You have what we call an external acoustic meatus, but we would refer to this as an auditory canal. Okay, so that external acoustic meatus is just your auditory canal. Okay, it's the pathway from the external to the middle ear structures. Okay, so from the outer environment to the inner. Functionally, your outer ear or external ear is there to catch sound waves, to catch them, and to pass them deeper into the ear through that auditory canal to deliver that stimuli so that we can interpret it. Okay, so it's all about capturing and relaying the sound waves, those vibrations from sound in the air, and relaying that to those middle ear structures. So eventually, whenever we deliver those sound waves through the auditory canal, eventually they will reach the eardrum, officially termed the tympanic membrane, but we call it eardrum for layman's terms. This is connective tissue, a boundary between the external and middle ear, and it's the sound waves actually mechanically hitting against the eardrum that causes transformational shift in overall shape, and that vibration is ultimately what carries signals mechanically along into the middle ear. We get to the middle ear. We call this the tympanic cavity. This is just meant to be a relay station between the outer and inner ear. It is made up of 3 tiny bones. We call these auditory ossicles, and you can see these highlighted here. We have the malleus, or hammer, the incus, or anvil, and the stapes, or stirrup. So these layman's terms, or these AKAs, if you will, hammer, anvil, and stirrup, are referring to the overall shape. So essentially, these are functioning to amplify sound waves, to make stronger, so that when they get to the inner ear, we have enough of a threshold in order to relay a signal. Okay, so what you can think of this as is a series of 3 tiny bones that, whenever they shift position, they create increasing leverage, and that amplifies the overall vibration that we received at the initial eardrum. So that's the idea here, is it's an amplification of signal. The auditory ossicles, they conduct those vibrations to what we call the oval window. And you can see that here, okay? So it eventually gets to what we call this oval window, okay? It's a little bit deep to that last little part, which is the stapes. And this is what actually helps to get the inner ear fluid, this fluid, moving, okay? And it's that fluid movement that ultimately is going to relay information forward. You have what we call a Eustachian tube, a passage from the middle ear to the pharynx. Okay, so going down to the pharynx, and this is basically going to help in equalizing pressure around the eardrum. Your ears popping is a good example where we help release that pressure that might build up. Typically what you do is you open your airway, you might open your mouth in order to force that pressure out that might have built up. That's why we do that, right? So it's just basically a passage where we can help with overall pressure so that it doesn't build up and damage our eardrum. And finally, you've got the inner ear. We call this a bony labyrinth. Labyrinth oftentimes referring to a maze. And as you can see, just looking at these green highlighted structures, it looks like a maze. There's a lot of stuff going on here in a variety of 3-dimensional directions. That is by design. That is so that we can effectively respond to a shift in that fluid internally in a variety of directions, giving us our sense of balance in 3-dimensional space. So both divisions are filled with these fluids that help basically conduct those sound vibrations that we've been using so far, and they allow us to hear and then respond to overall changes in our position in environment, right? So our overall change to equilibrium, or a sense of balance with our external environments. So overall, these are functioning to turn those physical vibrations and to transform them or translate them into electrical impulses, action potentials, and those can then travel to the brain and deliver those messages of initially sound. So we do want to break down just a little bit, what are these actual structures? We call it a bony labyrinth. There is a lot going on, but what are some of those key parts that are making this up, and how are they doing their jobs? We have what we call a vestibule. Okay, this is a key structure that we need for maintaining our sense of balance. So head movements, so if I move my head in a variety of different angles or directions, right, I can cause fluid to basically stimulate hair cells when that fluid moves in a variety of directions based on what direction my head moved. And these hair cells, based off of how fluid is brushing against those hair cells, this will send an action potential up through what we call the vestibular nerve. Okay, you can see this vestibular nerve here. So any sort of head movements or change in fluid is going to ultimately signal these hair cells. The shifting of these hair cells, or the stimuli to these hair cells, is what relays action potentials through that nerve going to the brain. You have semicircular canals. These are going to specifically aid in maintaining balance when your head rotates, right? So rotation in a variety of directions. You have these semicircular canals that are in a variety of directions so that you can effectively respond to movements in those 3-dimensional spaces. And then we've got our cochlea. This is what actually contains your hair cells. So the cochlea is right here, okay? Kind of looks like a snail shell. The hair cells are actually within the cochlea. They vibrate at different frequencies. So they can cause these vibrations based on the differences of sound. Maybe it's really low, and so those waves are a lot larger, or it's really high, and they're a lot more narrow, those waves for sound. And they will respond differently based off of different specific vibrations for those sound waves, for those vibrations to basically deliver more specific information as action potentials to the brain. Okay? So different frequencies are going to specifically stimulate the organ of the corti or corti, and this is going to what ultimately relays action potentials through the cochlear nerve. That cochlear nerve is here from the cochlea, and this is going to then go to your auditory cortex, which is that brain center for basically processing sound information. And that is all we're going to need to do in terms of actually going into the anatomy and a little bit of brief physiology when it comes to hearing and equilibrium. We do have, as all others, we have some lab stations where we're actually going to put this stuff into practice and explore this a little further, but that is a really good general exposure to your special senses here in Concept 2. I hope you found this information helpful, and we will see you at the next concept where we start looking into the endocrine system and your hormones. We'll see you there.